The sterile chemical scent of the Iron Fang trauma ward was suffocating. It smelled of bleached metallic blood and inevitable death. Elara lay completely paralyzed on the rigid hospital bed, her breathing a shallow, ragged rattle that echoed loudly in the quiet room. Her veins felt as though they had been injected with liquid fire. The silver-laced wolfsbane she had absorbed to save his life was currently eating her alive, from the inside out. Through the heavy soundproof observation glass of her intensive care unit, she could see him. Silas, the alpha king of the Iron Fang pack, the apex predator of the Northern Territories, and the man her soul was irrevocably tragically bound to. He was standing in the dimly lit hallway, dressed in a pristine midnight blue tailored suit. There was not a single drop of her blood on him. He stood tall, his broad shoulders impossibly tense, but his piercing ice blue eyes were fixed stubbornly on the heavy gold watch circling his wrist. He was not looking at her. He had not looked at her once since the medics rushed her into the subterranean bunker. Elara's inner wolf let out a pathetic dying whimper, scratching weakly at the walls of her mind. The golden thread of their fated mate, bond a tether that should have been humming with warmth and protective fury, was stretched terrifyingly thin. It felt like a frayed rope vibrating violently over a razor blade. She needed him. She needed his alpha aura to flood the room to stabilize her plummeting heart rate, to tell her that jumping in front of a poisoned silver blade, meant for his chest, had not been a meaningless sacrifice. But Silas did not move toward the door. Alpha, you have to go in there. The voice belonged to Gideon, the pack's chief enforcer. Gideon's voice bled through the intercom speaker above Elara's bed, a system she had quietly hacked months ago when she was nothing more than an unranked invisible data analyst for the pack. Gideon sounded frantic. His massive hands were pressed against the glass, his brown eyes wide with genuine panic as he looked at Elara's pale, sweating face. The medics say the toxin is necrotic, Gideon pleaded, stepping directly into Silas's path. Her cellular regeneration is completely failing Silas. If you do not go in there right now and use your bond to bolster her heart, she will not make it through the hour. Gideon, step aside. Silas's voice vibrated through the speaker. It was a lethal, chilling baritone that used to make Elara's heart flutter with quiet joy in the dark hours of the night. Tonight it sounded utterly devoid of emotion. It sounded like the voice of a stranger. "She took a blade meant for your heart," Gideon shouted, his frustration breaking the strict protocol of the royal court. "She is your mate. You cannot leave her here to die alone. She is an unranked analyst who performed her sworn duty to the crown," Silas corrected sharply. A terrifying flash of dominant amber ignited in his blue eyes, forcing the enforcer to take a step back. Silas checked his watch again, snapping it shut with a cold, definitive metallic click. "The healers have strict instructions to use every resource available in our vault. Elara is remarkably resilient. She will understand that the pack's survival must come first." In the bed, Elara's breath hitched, sending a fresh, agonizing wave of fire through her chest. "She will understand." The words echoed in the sterile room, heavier than the poison destroying her blood. Silas needed a political anchor to secure the southern borders. He needed a pure-blood royal, not a quiet human passing Omega, who smelled of soft vanilla and old books. He needed Vivian of the Blood Rose Pack. The betrothal ceremony was scheduled to begin in 20 minutes at the summit above them. Elara had accepted her hidden status for 3 years. She had accepted the secret late-night visits, the whispered promises in the dark that vanished like smoke in the daylight. She had accepted the devastating humiliation of watching him court Princess Vivian in front of the entire court, bearing the silent, crushing weight of her fated bond, because she believed deep down that he loved her. As the synthetic wolfsbane aggressively necrotized her lung tissue, the pathetic illusion of her sacrifice finally shattered into a million jagged pieces. She turned her heavy, agonizingly weak head toward the glass. Silas was looking at Gideon, his jaw set in a rigid line of absolute finality. "If I do not arrive at the summit to finalize the union with Vivian, the Blood Rose Pack will withdraw their border patrols. Thousands of our people will be slaughtered by the rogues," Silas stated, his voice ringing with pragmatic cruelty. "I choose the alliance. Have my car brought around immediately." Silas turned his back on the observation window. He did not offer a final glance. He did not pause. He simply walked away. His heavy, authoritative footsteps faded rapidly down the corridor as he marched toward a golden future with another woman, leaving her in a cold basement to choke on her own failing breaths. In the bed, Elara stared at the empty hallway. The profound, soul-crushing weight of his abandonment did not spark anger. It did not spark a desire for revenge. It sparked absolute, devastating clarity. She had bled for a man who viewed her as nothing more than a convenient, disposable meat shield. She had traded her dignity, her safety, and now her very life for a king who could not even spare 5 minutes to watch her die. A sudden, jagged burning sensation erupted directly in the center of her chest. It was not the silver poison. It was the mate bond. It was screaming in violent protest as the emotional and physical distance between them rapidly expanded, stretching the magical foundation beyond its breaking point. A true bond required mutual will and desire to survive catastrophic trauma. Silas had completely and totally withdrawn his. Let him go. Her inner wolf whimpered. It was a weak, pitiful sound echoing in the darkest corners of her fading consciousness. "I know," Elara whispered to the empty, sterile room. Her voice was barely a rasping breath. A single tear slipped down her cheek, burning her cold skin like battery acid. She closed her heavy eyelids. She stopped fighting the poison. She stopped trying to pull oxygen into her burning, ruined lungs. Instead, she reached deep into the center of her own battered soul. She grabbed the frayed, agonizing golden tether that connected her to the Alpha King, and with her final fleeting ounce of willpower, she violently severed it. The snap was completely silent in the physical world, but inside her mind it sounded like a glass cathedral shattering. The cardiac monitor beside her bed instantly let out a sharp, continuous, high-pitched wail. The heavy doors burst open. The Iron Fang medics rushed into the room, shouting frantically, their hands glowing with healing magic, pressing heavy defibrillator paddles firmly to her chest. Clear. Her body jerked on the bed, lifeless and heavy. But Elara was already gone. She felt a freezing, peaceful darkness rush over her, swallowing the agonizing pain, the bitter betrayal, and the toxic, suffocating love that had entirely ruined her. The flatline echoed continuously through the subterranean wing, a final definitive period to a tragic story that should have never begun. They pronounced her dead at 9:43 in the evening. What the arrogant, highly trained syndicate doctors did not know was that Elara possessed a dormant, highly recessive genetic mutation. A bloodline secret even she had never known. When the synthetic wolfsbane completely stopped her human heart, her body underwent a catastrophic ancient biological reset. The death of her human cells triggered a violent, localized, primal rebirth of the wolf hidden deep within her DNA. 2 hours after a weeping, Gideon had quietly moved her corpse to the freezing subterranean morgue, gently covering her face with a white sheet. Elara woke up. Her eyes snapped open in the pitch-black darkness of the morgue. She did not gasp for air. Her lungs expanded with terrifying, perfect efficiency. The burning poison was completely purged from her veins, replaced by a rushing torrent of pure, freezing power. The agonizing golden chain that had tethered her to Silas was permanently, blessedly dead. There was no warmth left in her chest. Only ice. She sat up, the white sheet falling away from her pale skin. The submissive, anxious posture of the Iron Fang data analyst was entirely eradicated. Her eyes, once a warm, desperate shade of hazel seeking approval, were now glowing with a faint, chilling silver light in the dark room. But the most staggering difference was her scent. The sweet, compliant vanilla of an unranked weak wolf was gone. It was replaced by something sharp, ancient, and wildly untraceable. She smelled of heavy rain falling on cold steel. Elara slipped silently off the metal table. Her bare feet touched the freezing tiles, but she felt absolutely no cold. She did not return to the upper floors. She did not seek out Gideon. She used her intimate encyclopedic knowledge of the Iron Fang logistics grid to bypass the subterranean security cameras. She stole a heavily armored ghost vehicle from the lower garage, forged a brand new digital identity, and vanished completely into the stormy night. While Silas was miles away, standing under crystal chandeliers and smiling for cameras with Vivian of the Blood Rose Pack, his true mate drove away from the mountains. She drove toward the ocean. She drove toward freedom. Elara was dead, and the woman who walked out of that morgue was never going to kneel for an alpha again. 1 year later, the coastal city of Meridian was 400 miles south of the Iron Fang territory. It was a sprawling neon-lit metropolis, where the air tasted heavily of sea salt and old money. Governed by human conglomerates and strictly enforced neutrality treaties, it was a sanctuary where pack laws held no power. It was the perfect place for a ghost to build an empire. The encryption on this vault is a military-grade polymorphic algorithm. The gallery director stammered, his polished dress shoes squeaking nervously against the hardwood floor. If it is not bypassed in exactly 40 seconds, the lockdown protocols will deploy and the entire exhibition is ruined. You are pacing, Mr. Sterling. It is distracting. A cool, melodic voice echoed from the shadows of the vault room. A woman stepped into the ambient light of the gallery, slowly pulling off a pair of thin black tactical gloves. She wore a tailored slate gray pantsuit that moved flawlessly with her lithe frame. Her dark hair, once long and unkempt, was now cut into a sharp, asymmetrical bob that exposed the elegant, unbroken line of her neck. It was Elara, but she was completely fundamentally transformed. The submissive, anxious posture of the Iron Fang analyst had been entirely eradicated. Her hazel eyes, once warm and desperately seeking approval, were now cold, sharp, and intensely calculating. But the most staggering difference was her scent. The sweet, compliant vanilla of a weak omega was gone. In its place was the crisp, untraceable scent of heavy rain falling on cold steel. It was a scent that commanded absolute attention. "The vault is open," Elara stated, tossing a small, modified decryption drive onto a nearby velvet table. Mr. Sterling gasped, rushing past her to pull the heavy steel doors wide open. "Miss Vance, you are a miracle worker. The Meridian Art House owes you a profound debt. Your consulting fee will be wired immediately." "Ensure that it is," Elara replied smoothly, checking a sleek silver watch on her wrist. Vance Security Solutions does not tolerate late invoices. She turned and walked out of the gallery, stepping onto the sunlit, bustling streets of Meridian. The ocean breeze caught her hair, and for a fleeting moment, she closed her eyes, simply breathing in the absolute freedom of her existence. Over the past 12 months, Elara had built a fortress of her own. Vance Security was the most sought-after private contracting firm on the coast. She designed impenetrable digital architectures, audited high-risk physical vulnerabilities, and operated completely outside the jurisdiction of the Werewolf Kings. She had immense wealth. She had undeniable power. She had a life completely devoid of alpha commands and tear-stained pillows. Her burner phone vibrated in her tailored pocket. She pulled it out, her sharp eyes narrowing as she read the encrypted text message from her lead intelligence broker. "Target confirmed for the Sapphire Charity Gala tonight. Iron Fang expansion into Meridian is imminent." Elara's thumb hovered over the glowing screen. Her breath caught just for a microscopic fraction of a second, before her heart steadied into a cold, ruthless rhythm. Silas was coming to Meridian. The Alpha King, intent on expanding his syndicate's legitimate business fronts, was attending the exact gala that Vance Security was contracted to protect. A weaker woman would have canceled the contract. A frightened woman would have fled the city until the northern wolves returned to their frozen mountains. Elara calmly locked her phone and slipped it back into her pocket. A cold, predatory smile curved her lips. She was not weak, and she certainly was not frightened of the man who had left her to die. Let the Alpha King come to her city. It was time he learned that the ghost he discarded was now a queen he could not touch. The Meridian Grand Hotel was a sprawling palace of gilded architecture and modern extravagance. Tonight, the main ballroom was transformed into an exclusive fortress. The guest list was a terrifying amalgamation of human billionaires and disguised syndicate alphas, all mingling under the guise of philanthropy. Elara stood on the high, shadowed balcony overlooking the main floor, a sleek earpiece secured discreetly beneath her sharp haircut. She wore a backless emerald green evening gown that flowed like liquid silk over her curves. It was a stark departure from her usual tactical suits. She was not hiding in the shadows tonight. She was commanding the room from the high ground. "Perimeter Alpha is secure. Her lead operative's voice crackled in her ear. "The Iron Fang convoy has arrived at the valet. 4 hostiles, heavily armored." "Stand down and observe," Elara murmured, her eyes locking onto the heavy brass-trimmed double doors at the far end of the ballroom. "They are guests tonight, not combatants. Do not provoke them." The brass doors swung open. The ambient chatter in the ballroom seemed to dip instantly. A collective instinctual hush fell over the wealthy crowd. As the apex predator of the North stepped into the magnificent light, Silas looked exactly as terrifying as she remembered. He wore a bespoke midnight black tuxedo that strained across his massive corded shoulders. His face was a harsh study of sharp angles and aristocratic cruelty. But there was a distinct chilling difference. The piercing ice blue eyes that used to hold a flicker of hidden warmth were entirely dead. He looked hollowed out. He carried a suffocating, oppressive aura of grief that made the humans in the room physically recoil without understanding why. Clinging tightly to his arm, looking radiant and entirely triumphant in a gown of spun silver, was Vivian. Elara stared down at them from the balcony. She waited for the familiar spike of agony. She waited for her chest to burn. But her heart remained a perfectly disciplined, steady drum in her chest. There was no pain. There was no longing. The sight of the woman he had chosen over her life elicited nothing more than a mild clinical disgust. "He looks terrible," Elara whispered to herself, taking a slow, elegant sip of her champagne. "Target is moving toward the main exhibit," her earpiece chimed. Elara set her crystal glass down. It was time to run the floor. As the head of security, she needed to be highly visible, ensuring the high-value targets knew her firm was in absolute control of the venue. She descended the sweeping carpeted staircase with the silent, lethal grace of a striking viper. She did not mask her presence. She let the heavy, confident click of her heels echo slightly as she stepped onto the pristine marble floor. Silas was standing near a massive bulletproof glass display case, housing a rare diamond necklace. Vivian was chattering animatedly beside him, pointing at the sparkling jewels. But Silas was not looking at the display. He was staring blankly at his own reflection in the glass, his mind clearly 1,000 miles away. Elara's patrol path required her to cross directly behind them. As she closed the distance, the ambient air currents shifted in the large room. The draft from a nearby ventilation grate caught her scent and carried it directly toward the Iron Fang King. It was not the soft vanilla scent of his deceased mate. It was the scent of rain steel and a terrifyingly dominant female. Silas's broad shoulders stiffened instantly. His inner wolf, which had been completely comatose and mourning for a year, suddenly thrashed against his ribcage with a violent, agonizing urgency. Silas spun around, his blue eyes flaring wide as he desperately searched the crowded floor. He looked right past the human billionaires. He looked past his own elite enforcers. His frantic gaze locked directly onto the woman in the emerald gown standing less than 10 feet away. Elara stopped. She did not flinch. She did not look away. She met his terrified, earth-shattering stare with a gaze so cold and perfectly detached it could have frozen the ocean. Silas dropped his champagne flute. The heavy crystal shattered loudly against the marble floor, the sharp noise cutting brutally through the classical music playing in the background. Vivian gasped, jumping backward. "Elara," Silas whispered. The word tore from his throat like a jagged piece of glass. The color drained entirely from his aristocratic face. He took a staggering, unsteady step forward, looking exactly like a man who had just seen a ghost step out of a grave. Elara held his gaze for exactly 3 seconds. She let him look deep into her eyes. She let him see the absolute terrifying emptiness where her boundless love used to reside. She let him feel the undeniable, horrific truth that the mate bond he was desperately reaching for in his soul was permanently, irrevocably dead. Then, without a single word of recognition, Elara turned her back on the Alpha King and walked away, disappearing flawlessly into the milling crowd. The moment Elara turned her back, the suffocating composure Silas had maintained for 12 agonizing months violently shattered. "Elara," he roared. It was a guttural, desperate sound that ripped through the elegant hum of the gala. Billionaires and socialites scrambled backward in terror, fleeing from the sudden eruption of primeval dominance. "Silas, stop! What is wrong with you?" Vivian shrieked, grabbing his arm as he surged forward. Silas did not even look at her. He shoved her manicured hand away with a callous, terrifying disregard. His blue eyes were locked entirely on the flash of emerald green disappearing through a side archway. He shoved past a waiter overturning a silver tray, entirely consumed by the impossible, blinding reality that his mate was alive. Elara did not run. Running was for prey. She walked with a steady, commanding cadence, slipping out of the main ballroom and into the muted, dimly lit service corridors of the hotel. "Boss, you have a hostile trailing you. Massive, moving fast. Need intercept," her operative asked over the comms. "Negative," Elara replied, her voice remaining a cool, even 60 beats per minute. She rounded a corner, the thick carpeting silencing her footsteps. "Maintain your perimeter. I will handle the king." She did not have to wait long. The heavy service doors burst open behind her. Silas practically tore them off their heavy brass hinges. He was panting, his expensive tuxedo jacket rumpled his massive chest, heaving as he closed the distance between them in 4 massive strides. "Elara," he gasped, reaching out to grab her bare shoulder. The exact moment his fingers grazed her skin, Elara pivoted. She did not use werewolf strength. She used flawless human tactical leverage. She grabbed his extended wrist, twisted her body, and used his own reckless momentum to slam him hard against the oak-paneled wall of the corridor. She pressed her forearm firmly against his throat. It was not enough to choke him, but it was enough to establish an absolute, undeniable physical boundary. Silas did not fight back. He crashed against the wall and froze, staring down at her with wide, devastated eyes. His chest shuddered. He looked completely, utterly unraveled. "My name is Elara Vance," she said, her voice dropping into an octave of pure freezing steel. "And if you touch me again without my explicit consent, I will have my operatives break both of your arms and toss you into the harbor." Silas stared at her, his mouth opening and closing soundlessly. His heightened senses were drowning. She looked like Elara. She sounded like Elara, but her scent was entirely foreign, and her eyes looked at him as if he were nothing more than an insect on the pavement. He searched his soul, desperately clawing through the dark void for the golden tether that had connected their inner wolves. He found nothing, only an empty, bleeding black hole. The bond. Silas choked out hot tears, instantly pooling in his ice-blue eyes and spilling over his sharp cheekbones. "I cannot feel you. The bond is gone." "Bonds require 2 living souls, Silas," Elara replied flatly, not easing the heavy pressure on his throat. "Elara died on a sterile table in your subterranean morgue. She waited for you to save her, and you did not come, so she let go." Silas let out a strangled, agonizing sob. The terrifying warlord of the Northern Territory slumped against the wall, sliding down an inch as the sheer gravitational weight of his guilt crushed him. "I thought you were dead," he wept, raising his trembling hands to hover near her face, terrified to actually touch her again. "I buried an empty casket. I buried my fucking heart inside it. You buried a political liability." Elara corrected her face, an unreadable mask of carved stone. "You chose the Blood Rose Alliance over my life. You made a tactical decision, Alpha. Do not insult my intelligence by pretending it was a tragedy." "It was the worst mistake of my life," Silas pleaded, his blue eyes burning with a desperate suicidal ferocity. "Vivian means nothing. The Alliance means nothing. I have been a ghost for a year, Elara. Please, come back to the North with me. Let me fix this." Elara stepped back, cleanly releasing him. She smoothed the front of her silk gown with impeccable, agonizing calm. "I am the Chief Executive Officer of Vance Security Solutions," Elara said, looking down at the weeping king. "I do not belong to the Iron Fang. I do not answer to your commands, and I certainly do not belong to you." She turned on her heel and walked down the dim corridor. "I will not let you go again," Silas roared to her, retreating back, scrambling to his feet, though he did not dare cross the physical boundary she had just set. "You already did," Elara threw over her shoulder, disappearing into the shadows. "Enjoy the Gala Alpha." The corporate headquarters of Vance Security Solutions occupied the top 3 floors of a sleek, modernist glass skyscraper overlooking the Meridian Bay. The interior was a masterpiece of slate-brush steel and ruthless efficiency. It was a physical manifestation of the walls Elara had built around her heart. At 9 o'clock in the morning, the day after the charity gala, Elara sat at the head of a sprawling obsidian conference table. She was reviewing the tactical audits for a maritime shipping conglomerate. She had slept perfectly. The confrontation with Silas had not shattered her hard-won peace. It had solidified it. She had looked directly into the eyes of the monster who had broken her, and she had felt absolutely nothing. The intercom on her polished desk buzzed. "Miss Vance, you have a walk-in appointment. They are refusing to leave the lobby." "Send security to escort them out, Sarah," Elara replied, not looking up from her glowing tablet. "Ma'am, it is the Iron Fang Syndicate. They have 3 heavily armored vehicles parked in our loading bay." Elara's silver stylus paused. A slow, deeply cynical breath escaped her lips. Silas was predictable, if nothing else. He was a creature of force and possession, fundamentally incapable of understanding the word no. "Send them up to Boardroom A," Elara commanded, her voice perfectly steady. "I will handle it." 10 minutes later, the heavy frosted glass doors of the boardroom hissed open. Gideon walked in first. The massive, battle-hardened Iron Fang enforcer stopped dead the exact moment he saw her sitting at the head of the table. His face, usually a mask of stoic brutality, drained completely of color. He gripped the edge of a leather chair, his broad chest heaving as his brown eyes shone with thick, unshed tears. "Goddess above," Gideon whispered, his voice cracking violently. "It is you. I moved your body to the morgue. I saw the monitor flatline." "It is good to see you, Gideon," Elara said, her tone softening just a microscopic fraction. Gideon had been the only one in the Northern Keep who had treated her with genuine respect when she was an invisible Omega. "But the woman you mourn is gone. My name is Elara Vance." Silas stepped into the room from the hallway. If he had looked terrible at the gala, he looked apocalyptic now. He was still wearing the exact same trousers and white dress shirt from the night before. His silk tie was missing the top buttons torn open. He looked like he had spent the entire night pacing inside a cage, tearing at his own skin. His blue eyes were deeply bloodshot, ringed with heavy, dark purple exhaustion. The terrifying, arrogant Alpha King of the North was gone. In his place stood a man completely hollowed out by grief. He did not sit down. He walked slowly to the edge of the obsidian table, placing both hands flat on the cold glass. He stared at her with a ravenous, desperate hunger, his chest rising and falling in shallow, erratic gasps. "Vance Security Solutions." Silas rasped, his voice raw and broken. "You built an empire in a year." "I am a remarkably fast learner," Elara replied, intertwining her fingers and resting them on the table. She looked at him with the detached clinical professionalism of a CEO meeting a highly difficult client. "You are trespassing Alpha. State your business, or I will have my operatives forcefully remove you." "I want to hire you," Silas said instantly. His hand trembled slightly as he pulled a heavy black titanium Iron Fang data drive from his pocket. He slid it across the glass toward her. "The Pack is expanding our southern shipping routes through Meridian. I need your firm to secure the logistics and physical parameters. I will pay whatever retainer you ask, triple your standard rate." Elara did not touch the drive. She looked at the flashing metal device and then slowly raised her eyes back to Silas. He was not trying to secure shipping routes. He was trying to buy her time. He was desperately trying to force her into a room with him, trying to use his vast wealth to bridge the massive, terrifying canyon she had carved between them. "My firm does not accept contracts from organizations with volatile leadership," Elara said smoothly, her voice slicing through the air like a scalpel. "And frankly, Alpha, your emotional stability seems severely compromised." Silas flinched. The words hit him with the force of physical blows. "Elara, please." "Miss Vance," she corrected sharply, her voice echoing violently off the glass walls. "My name is Elara Vance." Before Silas could offer another pathetic plea, the boardroom doors hissed open again. Vivian marched into the room, flanked heavily by 2 of her own Blood Rose elite guards. She wore a pristine designer white suit, her flawless makeup doing nothing to hide the ugly mask of territorial rage twisting her features. She had clearly tracked Silas's convoy through the city. "What is the meaning of this, Silas?" Vivian demanded, marching right up to the table. She slammed her expensive handbag down on the glass. "You abandoned me at the gala. You disappear all night, and I find you groveling to a private security contractor." "Who is this woman?" Vivian turned her vicious glare onto Elara. because Elara's scent had entirely changed from weak vanilla to dominant rain and steel. Vivian did not recognize the quiet, mousy data analyst from a year ago. She only saw a sharp, lethal CEO who had her mate's undivided obsessive attention. "Get out of this room, Vivian," Silas snarled, his voice dropping into a terrifying demonic timbre that made the heavy glass in the room vibrate. He did not even look at her. His bloodshot eyes remained locked entirely on Elara. "I am your Luna," Vivian shrieked, her pride deeply wounded. "I demand to know why you are throwing our pack's money at a glorified human mercenary." Elara slowly stood up. She did not raise her voice. She did not have to. She simply let her new terrifying aura bleed into the room. The scent of freezing rain and cold steel flooded the enclosed space, aggressively suffocating Vivian's sickeningly sweet floral scent. "He is throwing Iron Fang money at me, Princess Vivian," Elara said, her tone dripping with absolute freezing condescension, "because your pack's logistical architecture is a complete disaster. You hemorrhaged 30% of your maritime profits last quarter because your perimeter routing is archaic. You are a political figurehead. You are not a tactician." Vivian gasped, her face flushing an angry, violent red. She was a pure-blood royal. No one had ever spoken to her with such blatant, crushing disrespect. "How dare you speak to me like that?" Vivian screamed, pointing a manicured finger at Elara's chest. "I am the Luna of the Allied Packs. I will have my guards tear you apart right where you stand." Elara did not blink. She simply hit a single glowing button on her tablet. Instantly, the 4 frosted glass walls of the boardroom turned crystal clear. Surrounding the room, standing on the outer catwalks, were 12 heavily armored Vance security operatives. They were dressed in full tactical gear, aiming high-powered silver-laced sniper rifles directly through the glass. The bright red dots of their laser sights painted themselves instantly onto Vivian's chest and the foreheads of her 2 guards. The terrifying, synchronized click of 12 rifle safeties being switched off echoed clearly through the glass. Vivian froze. Her guards slowly raised their hands, trembling violently. "You are standing in my territory," Elara whispered. The sheer, unadulterated dominance in her voice forced Vivian to physically take a stumbling step backward. Elara's eyes glowed with a faint, predatory silver light. "If your guards twitch, they will be completely liquefied before they can draw a single breath." Elara stated, her voice as calm as a frozen lake. "You play at being a queen, Vivian, but I run an empire. Now step away from my table." Vivian swallowed hard, her arrogant facade shattering into sheer terror. She looked at Silas for protection, but the Alpha King was not moving to defend her. Silas was staring at Elara. He was absolutely mesmerized. His amber eyes burned with an obsessive, reverent awe. His massive chest heaved. He was watching the woman he had severely underestimated, the woman he had thrown away, command a room of apex predators with terrifying, flawless ease. His inner wolf, completely dead to Vivian, howled in desperate, aching worship for the true queen standing before him. Elara turned her piercing gaze back to Silas. "The Iron Fang contract is accepted, Alpha," Elara declared, reaching out and picking up the black data drive. "My retainer is $10 million paid up front. And my first condition is that your false Luna is permanently barred from entering my building ever again. If she crosses my threshold, I will consider it an act of war, and I will act accordingly." Silas did not hesitate. He did not look at his furious betrothed. "Done." Silas rasped, his voice thick with absolute submission. "Whatever you want, Elara. It is yours." "Get her out of my sight," Elara commanded, sitting back down in her leather chair and tapping her stylus against the tablet. "Gideon," Silas ordered, his tone shifting instantly from submissive to lethal as he addressed his enforcer. "Escort Vivian to the vehicles, and prepare her luggage. She is returning to the Blood Rose Pack immediately." "You cannot do this to me!" Vivian shrieked as Gideon grabbed her arm, dragging her firmly toward the heavy doors. "The Alliance! You need my army, Silas." "I do not need your army," Silas growled, his eyes never leaving Elara. "The Alliance is severed." The doors hissed shut, cutting off Vivian's frantic screams. The boardroom was suddenly completely silent, save for the hum of the holographic projector. Silas stood alone at the table, the Alpha King completely at the mercy of the woman he had broken. "The initial deposit will be wired within the hour," Silas said softly. He took a hesitant step forward, desperate to close the physical distance between them. Elara, please. Just give me 5 minutes to explain. I was terrified. The council threatened your life if I claimed an unranked mate. I thought leaving you was the only way to keep you safe. Your 5 minutes expired a year ago on a surgical table, Elara replied without looking up. My operatives will meet you at the Meridian docks at midnight to secure your cargo. Do not be late, Alpha. I charge heavily for wasted time. The Meridian docks were a sprawling, chaotic labyrinth of rusting shipping containers, towering industrial cranes, and thick rolling fog creeping off the freezing ocean. It was exactly midnight. The heavy metallic tension of impending violence hung thick in the salty air. Elara stood atop a 4-story gantry crane. She was dressed in pitch-black, highly modified tactical gear that hugged her frame perfectly. A sleek, suppressed sniper rifle was slung securely across her back. She did not look like an Omega. She looked like the Reaper. She held a high-powered thermal tablet in her gloved hands, her sharp eyes scanning the digital heat blooms of the loading zone below. The Iron Fang Syndicate was moving a massive high-value shipment of refined silver weaponry through the port. It was a highly classified transfer, which meant it was entirely vulnerable. Convoy is holding at Sector Delta. Gideon's deep voice crackled softly over the encrypted radio channel. We are awaiting your clear, Vance. Hold position, Gideon, Elara murmured. Her eyes narrowed as she studied a cluster of erratic thermal signatures on her screen. I have unauthorized heat blooms moving through the eastern alleyway. 15 hostiles. They are running cold suits to mask their body heat, but the exhaust vents are giving them away. They are heavily armed. Down on the wet tarmac, Silas was standing near the lead-armored transport truck. He was not wearing a tuxedo tonight. He wore heavy tactical body armor over a black combat shirt looking every inch the brutal, terrifying warlord of the northern mountains. He tapped his earpiece, his jaw tightening. Rogue mercenaries. Silas's voice growled over the comms. They must have intercepted the cargo manifest. I am moving my men to intercept the flank. Negative, Iron Fang Actual, Elara commanded sharply. She absolutely refused to use his name on a live tactical channel. They are heavily armed and deliberately funneling you into a pre-planned kill box. If you push forward, you will lose half your squad in the crossfire. Hold your perimeter. My team will neutralize the threat. I am not letting you fight my battles, Elara, Silas snarled back. His primal protective alpha instincts violently overrode his tactical sense. His inner wolf was screaming, desperate to shield his mate from harm. I am coming up there. Before Elara could argue, the deafening crack of a heavy sniper rifle echoed through the foggy docks. A high-caliber round sparked violently off the metal railing mere inches from Elara's leg. The ambush had begun. Below her, the docks erupted into absolute chaos. The rogue mercenaries poured out from the dark shadows between the shipping containers. They opened fire on the Iron Fang convoy with automatic weapons. The cold night air instantly filled with the terrifying roar of gunfire, the shattering of glass, and the acrid burning stench of cordite. Elara did not panic. Her heart rate remained at a steady, perfectly disciplined rhythm. She dropped the thermal tablet, unslung her rifle, and went to work. She moved along the high, narrow catwalk with terrifying mechanical precision. She raised the scope to her eye. Breathe in, hold, fire. She dropped 3 rogue mercenaries before they even realized they were being flanked from the sky. She was not the anxious, trembling girl hiding behind a desk anymore. She was a lethal ghost who had spent a grueling year training with the most dangerous private military contractors on the eastern seaboard. Elara! Silas's frantic roar echoed over the deafening gunfire. He had abandoned the safety of the armored trucks. He was sprinting wildly across the open tarmac toward the base of her crane. He was fully intent on throwing himself into the direct line of fire just to reach her, desperate to prove his worth, desperate to protect her. Get back to the convoy, you absolute idiot, Elara yelled down. She ducked quickly behind a thick steel beam as heavy return fire chewed up the metal catwalk around her. Silas did not listen. A massive rogue mercenary stepped out from the shadows of an alleyway, raising a silver-loaded shotgun directly at Silas's unprotected flank. Silas was too distracted looking up at Elara to notice the lethal threat in his blind spot. Elara did not think. Her body moved entirely on deeply ingrained tactical instinct. She vaulted over the metal railing of the high catwalk. She dropped 20 feet through the air, landing heavily on the corrugated steel roof of a shipping container below. She rolled, absorbing the brutal impact flawlessly, and brought her rifle up in a single fluid motion. She fired 2 suppressed rounds. The rogue mercenary dropped dead to the wet pavement before his finger could even graze the trigger of his shotgun. Silas spun around, his blue eyes wide with shock, as he watched her drop from the foggy sky like a dark, avenging angel. "I told you to hold the perimeter," Elara hissed. She slid down the side of the shipping container and landed lightly on the tarmac right beside him. She kept her weapon raised, sweeping the foggy alleyway for remaining hostiles. Silas simply stared at her. He completely ignored the fierce gunfire still raging 50 yards away. The freezing rain was slicking her dark hair to her pale face. Her eyes were burning with a cold, fierce, intoxicating adrenaline. She had just saved his life. Again. But this time, she had not thrown her fragile body in front of a blade to save him. She had executed the threat herself with absolute, uncompromising power. "You didn't need me to save you," Silas breathed. The realization hit him with the devastating force of a physical blow. The fragile, quiet mate he remembered, the girl who needed his protection, was entirely gone. "I have never needed you to save me, Alpha," Elara replied coldly, not even sparing him a glance as she scanned the perimeter. "I needed you to choose me, and you didn't. Now stay behind me. I have a cargo manifest to secure." She stepped past him, marching directly into the thick fog and the raging gunfire. She was the apex predator of a concrete jungle he had absolutely no hope of commanding. Silas watched her go. The agonizing hollow ache in his chest expanded until it threatened to crush his lungs. He had not just lost his mate to a political marriage. He had lost a terrifying, magnificent queen who did not need a king. The bloody aftermath of the dockside ambush left a heavy metallic tension hanging over the Vance security boardroom. It was 3 o'clock in the morning. Elara stood by the massive floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the glittering Meridian skyline. She was holding a steaming mug of black coffee. She had not bothered to change out of her dark tactical gear. The adrenaline was still humming quietly, steadily in her blood. Behind her, the heavy glass doors hissed open. Silas walked in. He looked battered and deeply exhausted. A superficial graze from a silver ricochet stained the dark fabric of his shoulder, and the stark exhaustion on his aristocratic face was bone deep. He did not carry the immense arrogance of a king tonight. He carried the heavy, suffocating weight of a man drowning in his own colossal regrets. "The perimeter is entirely secure," Silas said. His voice was quiet, almost hesitant. "Your operatives are exceptional, Elara. The Iron Fang owes you a profound debt." Elara did not turn around to face him. "My firm expects the transfer of the second installment by dawn." "It has already been wired," Silas replied, taking a cautious, unsteady step deeper into the room. He stared at the rigid, unforgiving line of her shoulders. "But the rogue strike was too coordinated. They knew our exact routing schedule, they knew the guard rotations, they knew the blind spots in the crane grid." "I am well aware." Elara finally turned. She set her ceramic mug down on the obsidian table with a sharp clink. She tapped a command sequence into the central holographic projector. "They knew because someone inside your inner circle gave them the architectural blueprints." A sprawling, glowing web of encrypted digital data feeds flickered to life in the air above the table. Elara swiped her fingers expertly through the blue light, isolating a single heavily encrypted audio file. "I ran a trace on the communication frequencies the rogue mercenaries used during the firefight," Elara explained, her voice entirely devoid of pity. "I backtraced the IP origin of the encrypted data burst they received just 20 minutes before the ambush began." Silas's thick brow furrowed. He stepped up to the table, his blue eyes scanning the glowing code. "Where did it originate?" "It originated from the Iron Fang Tower," Elara said softly. She locked her cold eyes onto his. "It originated from your penthouse, Silas." She tapped the audio file. The heavy static crackled through the boardroom speakers, followed by a voice that was sickeningly familiar to both of them. "The convoy holds at Sector Delta," Vivian's voice echoed through the room. Her aristocratic tone was dripping with pure toxic venom. "I do not care if you destroy the precious cargo. I only care about the security contractor." Elara Vance. Ensure she is caught in the crossfire. Ensure she does not leave those docks alive. Do you understand? Silas froze completely. The remaining color drained entirely from his face, leaving his skin a ghostly, sickening ashen gray. Vivian, Silas whispered. The word tasted like vile poison on his tongue. She sold your routing schedules to a hostile rogue syndicate, Elara corrected coldly, crossing her arms over her tactical vest. She committed high treason against the Iron Fang crown, all just to have me killed in an ambush. Elara let the silence stretch for a moment, letting the horrific reality sink completely into his bones. She didn't just commit treason, Silas. She proved exactly what I already knew. You chose a political anchor who is actively maliciously sinking your ship. Your grand royal marriage is built on quicksand. Silas's massive fists clenched at his sides. His knuckles turned stark white. The ice blue in his eyes suddenly ignited into a violent, terrifying, blinding amber. The betrayal was absolute staggering in its cruelty. He had let Elara die on a cold operating table for the sake of an alliance with the Blood Rose Pack. And in return, his chosen Luna had actively conspired with his deadliest enemies to assassinate the only woman he actually loved. I will tear her apart, Silas snarled. His inner wolf thrashed violently against his ribs, demanding immediate bloody vengeance for the lethal insult to his true mate. You will do no such thing in my city, Elara commanded. Her voice dropped like a massive physical weight in the room, stopping Silas dead in his tracks. She is an Iron Fang problem. I will not have Vance Security dragged into a massive syndicate war just because you couldn't control your treacherous fake wife. She is not my wife. Silas spat the sheer revulsion evident in every syllable. The mating ceremony was a political farce. We never completed the bonding rites. And as of tonight, the Blood Rose Alliance is officially permanently severed. I will formally nullify the treaty before dawn. He looked at Elara. His burning amber eyes softened into a desperate, agonizing plea. He stepped closer, stopping just 1 inch short of the physical boundary she fiercely enforced. I let you die for a lie, Silas whispered. His voice cracked violently with the sheer crushing magnitude of his grief. Tears leaked from his eyes, tracking slowly down his bruised face. I was a coward, Elara. I was terrified of losing the throne to the council, and in doing so, I lost the only thing that ever made the throne worth holding. He dropped slowly to his knees. The Alpha King of the North, the most feared predator on the continent, knelt completely on the polished floor before her. I don't care about the Iron Fang anymore. Silas wept, looking up at her with naked, bleeding devotion. I only care about you. Please, come back to me. Let me crown you. I will make you my Luna in the blinding light where the entire world can see you. I will give you everything. Elara stared down at the broken king kneeling at her feet. The man who had been too afraid to publicly claim her 3 years ago was now offering her the entire world. It was the beautiful, impossible fairy tale she had once prayed for in the dark, lonely corners of her old life. And it meant absolutely entirely nothing to her now. You still don't understand, Silas, Elara said. Her voice was achingly gentle, yet completely devastatingly final. I do not want your crown. I do not want your throne. I built my own empire from the bloody ashes of the heart you broke. I am not a Luna, waiting to be claimed. She stepped back, distancing herself from his desperate reach. I am Elara Vance, and I stand on my own. Silas flinched as if she had physically struck him. He opened his mouth to beg to negotiate, to offer absolutely anything he had left in his hollowed-out soul. But before he could speak a single word, the deafening, ear-splitting shriek of the building's proximity alarms shattered the tense silence. Pulsing red emergency lights instantly bathed the sleek boardroom in blood-colored hues. The holographic projector above the table blared a massive, flashing warning. Boss Gideon's voice roared over the intercom, completely drowning out the sirens. We have a massive perimeter breach hostiles rappelling directly from the roof and breaching the lower lobby. It is the Blood Rose Elite Guard. Vivian sent an execution squad directly to the tower. The Vance Security skyscraper was under full siege. Vivian, realizing her treason had likely been exposed by the failed dock ambush, had played her final desperate hand. If she could not rely on the rogue mercenaries to kill Elara Vance, she would use her own elite assassins to slaughter both the contractor and the Alpha King, paving a bloody path for her to seize the Iron Fang throne by right of betrothal. "Lock down all elevators!" Elara shouted. She did not panic. Her fingers flew across the master architectural terminal, instantly shifting from a cold CEO into a ruthless combat commander. Heavy, reinforced blast shutters down over the perimeter windows. Kill the main power grid to the stairwells. Vent the localized defense gas into sectors 3 and 4. They breached the 70th floor. "They are moving up fast," Gideon reported over the radio, the deafening sound of heavy automatic gunfire, already echoing in the background. "There are at least 40 of them, Elara, heavily armed with silver munitions." Elara unslung her suppressed rifle from her shoulder, checking the chamber with a sharp metallic clack. "Hold the choke point at the security desk, Gideon. I am coming down." Silas stepped directly in front of her, his massive frame completely blocked the boardroom doors. He did not have a rifle. He did not have tactical body armor. He had only a heavy military-grade combat knife he had pulled from his boot and the terrifying primal rage of an alpha who had finally found something worth dying for. "You are not going out there," Silas growled. His eyes were blazing a solid predatory amber in the red emergency lighting. "They are here for you. I will not let you take a bullet for me again. Stay behind the blast doors." "Do not mistake me for a helpless damsel, Silas," Elara snapped, shoving her hands hard against his broad chest. He did not budge a single inch. "This is my building. Those are my operatives bleeding out there because of your mess. Now move." Silas did not move. Instead, he reached out. His large, blood-stained hand gently cupped the side of her pale face. For a fleeting, heartbreaking second, the terrifying warlord vanished, leaving only a broken man offering a final agonizing goodbye. "3 years ago, I chose a throne over your life," Silas whispered, his thumb brushing softly against her cheekbone. "Today, I choose you over my own. I love you, Elara, even if you never forgive me." Before Elara could process the crushing weight of his words, Silas turned and slammed his fist against the door control panel. The heavy glass doors hissed open. Silas vaulted out into the wide corridor, just as a highly trained squad of Blood Rose assassins rounded the corner. He did not shift into his massive wolf form. The narrow corridor did not allow for it. He fought as a man, but with the brutal, unstoppable ferocity of a wild beast. He lunged directly into the heavy line of fire. He moved faster than humanly possible, dodging the initial volley of silver bullets and driving his combat knife viciously into the throat of the lead assassin. He grabbed the dying man's assault rifle, using it as a heavy, blunt instrument to shatter the skull of the next attacker. Elara watched from the doorway, her heart suddenly hammering a frantic, terrifying rhythm against her ribs. Silas was fighting like a man who fully intended to die tonight. He was not taking cover. He was aggressively, deliberately positioning his massive body in front of the Vance security operatives who had been pinned down in the hallway. He was actively absorbing the incoming fire to shield her people. "Covering fire!" Elara roared to her remaining operatives. She raised her own rifle, stepping into the doorway. She took precise, lethal shots over Silas's broad shoulders, dropping 3 Blood Rose assassins who tried to flank him from the left. The hallway became an absolute massacre of shattering glass, splintering drywall, and deafening noise. Silas was a one-man wrecking ball, carving a path of bloody ruin through the elite guard. But there were simply too many of them. A sniper hidden deeply in the shadows at the far end of the long corridor leveled a heavy-caliber rifle directly at Elara's chest. The bright red laser sight painted a small, lethal dot right over her heart. Silas saw the laser. He saw the sniper's finger pull the trigger. "No," Silas roared. He did not think. He did not calculate the political fallout of his death. He simply threw his massive body violently backward, diving entirely into the deadly trajectory of the bullet. The high-caliber round, laced with a highly concentrated dose of liquid silver, tore cleanly through Silas's tactical vest and buried itself deep into his abdomen. The massive kinetic force lifted him entirely off his feet, throwing him backward, through the air and into the boardroom. He hit the floor hard, sliding across the polished obsidian tiles, leaving a thick, dark streak of alpha blood in his wake. The gunshot echoed into a horrifying, suffocating silence. Elara stood completely frozen in the doorway. She stared at the bleeding, broken body of the Alpha King. The entire world seemed to slow to a terrifying, crawling pace. The acrid smell of gunpowder was suddenly violently overwhelmed by the sharp metallic stench of his blood. He had taken the silver bullet for her. It was the ultimate undeniable reversal of the night she died. "Silas!" Elara screamed. She dropped her heavy rifle. She sprinted across the long boardroom, sliding hard to her knees beside him. Silas was gasping, his large hands clutching his ruined stomach. The deadly silver poison was already webbing rapidly across his pale skin in dark necrotic veins. His ice-blue eyes fluttered, fighting through the agonizing pain to focus on her face. "I chose you." Silas choked out hot blood bubbling past his pale lips. He forced a weak, incredibly agonizing smile. "I finally chose you." The thick, impenetrable wall of ice Elara had painstakingly built around her heart for a year violently, spectacularly shattered. The cold, detached CEO vanished instantly, leaving only a woman utterly terrified of losing the man she had never truly stopped loving. "You stupid, arrogant fool!" Elara sobbed frantically, tearing open his tactical vest and pressing her bare hands desperately against the gaping wound. The hot blood poured through her fingers impossibly fast. "You do not get to die just to balance a ledger. Do you hear me? I refuse to let you die." "It is okay." Silas wheezed his hand weakly, coming up to grasp her blood-stained wrist. His touch was freezing cold. "I was a ghost anyway, Elara. Without you." "Boss, they are breaching the final barricade," Gideon yelled from the chaotic hallway, providing desperate cover fire. "We are completely out of ammunition." Elara looked from Silas's dying face to the shattered doorway. If she stayed on her knees weeping, they would both be executed in seconds. She did not have the alpha aura to command an army. She did not have a magical mate bond to draw miraculous strength from. But she had something far more dangerous. She had the absolute uncompromising brilliance of a queen who had built an empire from scratch. Elara stood up. Her hazel eyes were not filled with hopeless tears anymore. They were burning with a cold, terrifying, blinding silver fire. She turned to the master architectural control console on the boardroom table. She keyed in her absolute zero override code. "Gideon, fall back into the boardroom right now," Elara roared. Gideon and the 3 surviving operatives dove desperately through the doors, just as Elara smashed her bloody hand down on the central lockdown button. The heavy 4-inch thick steel blast doors slammed shut with a deafening boom, sealing them securely inside the room. But Elara was not finished. She keyed a secondary highly classified sequence into the console. The Vance security skyscraper was not just a corporate building, it was a massive lethal weapon she had personally designed. "Deploying localized suppression," Elara commanded the system. Outside the heavy boardroom doors in the ruined hallway where the remaining 30 Blood Rose assassins were stacking up to blow the barricade, the ceiling panels dropped open. A massive localized electromagnetic pulse detonated. The tactical visors, encrypted comms, and laser sights of the assassins instantly shorted out, blinding and deafening them. Immediately following the pulse, heavy acoustic dampening foam violently flooded the corridor from the fire suppression vents. It expanded rapidly, hardening into a concrete-like substance within seconds. The muffled, panicked screams of the assassins were entirely neutralized as they were instantly pinned to the floor, encased in an impenetrable, suffocating prison. The bloody siege was over in exactly 15 seconds. Elara did not wait for the dust to settle. She dropped back to her knees beside Silas. He was completely unconscious. His breathing was a shallow, terrifying, ragged rattle. His heart was failing. "Medic," Elara screamed, tearing the military-grade trauma kit from her tactical belt. "Gideon, get over here and apply heavy pressure." Gideon scrambled over his massive hands, pressing down hard on the wound, as Elara frantically prepped a massive dose of concentrated adrenaline and a highly experimental silver neutralizing coagulant she had developed for her operatives. She jammed the long needle directly into Silas's chest, pushing the plunger down hard. "Come back to me," Elara whispered fiercely. She leaned intimately over him, her forehead resting against his rapidly cooling skin. She reached deep into her soul, forcing the dormant severed mate bond to ignite with her own sheer willpower. "You do not get to leave me again, Silas. I am not waiting this time. I am demanding it." For 10 agonizing, terrifying seconds, absolutely nothing happened. The horrifying memory of her own flatline echoed mockingly in her mind. Then Silas's massive chest arched violently off the floor. He took a horrific gasping breath. His eyes snapped wide open. The brilliant amber fire ignited fiercely in his irises, fighting back the dark necrotic poison. The powerful coagulant hit his bloodstream, halting the silver just long enough for his supreme alpha healing to finally trigger. He coughed violently, rolling onto his side, but his heart was beating. He was alive. Elara slumped back onto her heels. Her hands were covered in his blood, trembling with sheer, overwhelming relief. Silas pushed himself up onto one shaking arm. He looked around the blood-stained boardroom at the sealed blast doors and then up at Elara. She had not cowered behind him. She had commanded the room, neutralized an entire army in seconds, and saved his life with her own absolute brilliance. "You really didn't need me to save you," Silas murmured. A look of profound, reverent awe settled deeply over his exhausted features. "No," Elara said. A small, genuine, beautiful smile finally broke through the thick ice of her heart. She reached out gently, wiping a smear of blood from his sharp cheekbone. "I didn't need you to save me, Alpha. I just needed you to fight for me." Silas leaned heavily into her gentle touch, closing his eyes as a single tear slipped down his face. "I will fight for you for the rest of my life, my queen." 5 years later, the Meridian skyline was bathed in the warm, golden light of the late afternoon sun. Inside the top floor of the newly expanded Vance Iron Fang Tower, the atmosphere was a seamless, powerful blend of corporate efficiency and formidable pack authority. The glass and steel skyscraper was no longer just the headquarters of a private security firm. It was the central beating heart of a unified continental empire. Elara sat comfortably at the head of a massive, sleek conference table, idly tapping a silver stylus against a digital ledger. She wore a tailored, deep crimson suit that exuded an air of absolute, unshakable command. Seated across from her, sweating profusely, was Alpha Kalen of the Western Ridge Pack. Kalen was a notoriously stubborn traditionalist, but today his usual arrogance had been completely thoroughly eroded. "The terms are strictly non-negotiable, Alpha Kalen," Elara said. Her voice was smooth, melodic, and terrifyingly firm. "You will surrender the toll rights on the northern mountain passes to Vance Logistics. In return, our syndicate will guarantee your borders against the remaining rogue factions. If you decline, we pull our heavily armed operatives back tonight." Kalen swallowed hard. His nervous eyes darted to the shadowed corner of the room. Silas stood leaning casually against a structural pillar, his muscular arms crossed over his broad chest. He wore a dark, impeccably tailored suit, the very picture of lethal, predatory grace. He did not speak. He did not have to. The mere presence of the Alpha King, fully healed and radiating an intense, deeply protective aura that saturated the entire room, was enough to make any visiting Alpha feel terrified. "I accept the terms, Queen Elara," Kalen finally conceded. His voice cracked slightly as he reached for the glowing digital contract. He signed it quickly, eager to escape the suffocating pressure of the room. "Excellent doing business with you." Elara smiled a sharp corporate expression as she powered down the table's display. "Gideon will see you out." The heavy glass doors slid open, and Gideon, now serving as the Joint Chief of Operations for both the firm and the Northern Syndicate, stepped in to escort the trembling Alpha to the elevators. The exact moment the doors clicked shut, the heavy, intimidating atmosphere in the boardroom vanished instantly. Silas pushed off the pillar. A slow, deeply affectionate smile curved his lips as he walked toward the head of the table. "You really enjoyed that," Silas murmured. His ice-blue eyes flashed with profound, endless admiration. "I think he would have given you the literal deed to his pack house if you had simply asked for it." "He was trying to overcharge our supply lines by 30% on freight," Elara replied, leaning comfortably back in her expensive leather chair and stretching her arms. "He needed to be gently reminded that our empire does not pay tolls. We collect them." Silas chuckled. It was a deep, vibrating sound that made her heart flutter with warmth. He moved behind her chair, gently resting his large, calloused hands on her shoulders. He began to massage the tense muscles at the base of her neck. "You are a terrifyingly beautiful queen, Elara," he whispered, leaning down to press a soft, lingering kiss to the crown of her head. "And you are a surprisingly patient king." Elara leaned her head back against his solid stomach, closing her eyes as the tension of the long day melted away entirely under his loving touch. It had taken time. The deep trauma of her death and his brutal betrayal had not been miraculously erased overnight by a single act of heroism. But Silas had spent every single day of the last 5 years proving that he meant exactly what he said in that blood-stained boardroom. He had violently dismantled the archaic political structures of the High Council. Armed with the security footage of Vivian's treason, he had banished the Blood Rose Princess to a rogue prison for the rest of her miserable life. He had merged his massive syndicate with her firm, ensuring that Elara remained CEO and absolute undeniable equal in every single decision they made. He had not just asked for her forgiveness. He had built a brand new world where she never had to be afraid or hidden ever again. Silas's hands slid slowly down from her shoulders, moving around to rest gently, reverently on her slightly rounded stomach. The gesture was endlessly tender. "How was the medical appointment this morning?" Silas asked softly. His voice was thick with a sudden overwhelming emotion. Elara placed her hands over his, smiling warmly at the golden sunlight streaming through the windows. "The doctor said the heartbeat is incredibly strong, and Gideon owes me $100. It is a girl." Silas's breath hitched loudly. The terrifying, ruthless warlord of the Northern Territories buried his face deep in the curve of her neck, letting out a ragged sigh of pure, unadulterated joy. He pressed a series of soft, devoted kisses against her pulse point. "An heir," Silas whispered. His inner wolf hummed a beautiful song of perfect absolute contentment through the incredibly strong, genuine mate bond they had painstakingly rebuilt together from the ashes. A true Iron Fang princess. A Vance Iron Fang princess, Elara corrected, playfully turning her head to capture his lips in a deep, grounding, passionate kiss. She is going to have her father's terrifying strength and her mother's complete inability to tolerate bad logistics. Silas laughed brightly against her mouth. He pulled her gently up from the chair and entirely into his strong arms, holding her tightly as the golden hour sun bathed their office in a warm, triumphant light. The dark ghost of the past was truly permanently gone, replaced by a radiant, unbreakable future. Elara Vance did not surrender her company. She did not wait in the dark shadows of a king. She built an empire of her own, proving once and for all that the greatest power in the world is not found in an arranged destiny, but in the unbreakable strength of a woman reborn. If you loved this thrilling story of tactical revenge, second chance romance, and unyielding female empowerment, please remember to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more incredible audiobooks.